Good evening, everybody. Well, I'll be taking a step back from what we've been discussing all this while. Presenters had spoken about social media, the impact of different aspects from different channels in which public is reaching out to the police, to the public safety agencies. I'll be taking a step back in terms of how public safety internally can reach out to the first responders on the ground to serve the public. Well, the main aspect about police communication is mobility. We're not talking about a control room managing the complete public safety aspect. We're talking about a control room managing the flow of information from the public to the first responder on the ground. Now, it could be a PCR van, it could be a road outpost of police, it could be a beat constable. Those are the actual guys who need to get that information in real-time mode to act upon that information. It could be actually saving someone's life, property, and so forth. So that's where the whole communication network for police becomes paramount important. And wireless communication is the most important medium for police communication. So what are the typical requirements for this kind of a wireless communication network? Well, one thing to understand is that this is unlike your typical GSM cellular communication. In that communication, your calls can drop, your calls might not go through, there's congestion, and so forth. The calls typically are from person A to person B. While over here in police communication is more of a group communication mode in terms of one to many. It's basically a dispatch application. The control room gets information on which it has to act, and it transfers that information to multiple stakeholders within the police agency, on the ground, in the offices, and so forth. So it's one-to-many communication in real-time mode that has to happen. It cannot happen that the call of a police person doesn't go through. It has to go through. That is the whole pedigree on which the mission-critical communication has been built. Fast call setup, highly resilient and reliable, highly efficient, giving proper coverage for the entire police force. As I said, the main aspect of police communication is mobility. It could be on the road, it could be in the vehicle, but it's all links across to mobility because the police people have to be moving around in different aspects in different areas. So it's all about moving that information from the control room to the first responder. Just imagine that you're calling a dial 100 number, it reaches the control room. The control room has to act on that information for that information to be shared across to a first responder to act upon it. So it's all about moving that information to the point of action. And that's where the wireless communication network comes into picture. Typical key requirements for this kind of a network. One is highly resilient. You have issues like spectrum, you have issues like congestion, you have issues like call dropping, you have issues like network failures. We typically hear the cell site is down, so there's no signal in that area. It can't happen in police communication. Just imagine that a police person says that I couldn't entertain a request from a civil society because the sites over there was down. I couldn't reach the police person on the road over there. It's unacceptable. Spectrum, control, effective dispatching, effective control in terms of dispatching that information, and a secured network for communicating that information on which nobody can have access to. We're talking about a police communication network. And many of us think that why can't police use a GSM network? There's a difference in that. Police needs a private, secure, reliable network. You might argue that even the same thing can be done on GSM network. The answer is no. Just think about a typical scenario on a New Year Eve. How many of you have gone through an issue of SMS not going through, calls not getting through? But that doesn't bother you. You will maybe after an hour make another attempt, the call goes through. Have the same scenario for a police officer who is attending to public safety requirements on a New Year Eve using a GSM phone. Would that be okay and appropriate for him to have a similar communication mode? And answer is no. I think that is where the importance lies for having a own dedicated private network for police usage. Even for a simple example, giving you a correlation, for a dial 100 kind of a thing where you reach out to police, police has in turn multiple lines for its own usage for dial 100, so that the call of a civil society person can reach to the police. So on a similar line, even for the internal communication requirement for police, they need to have a highly robust, resilient, and reliable network on which they can reach out to their internal agents who are on the field, who are the first responders. This is a typical example from a report from Pentagon based upon the 9/11 incident in the US. And that's what they mentioned, that in time of crisis, the networks get overloaded and they're not suitable. I'm talking about the commercial networks, not suitable for public safety agencies to use the network. Another key typical example is of natural disasters. Sir mentioned about disaster management. Absolutely, I mean, it could be artificial, it could be man-made, it could be natural, floods, earthquake, bomb blast, could be anything. But what happens at that moment of time is basically panic. And in that panic state, you have everybody trying to reach out to everybody. The channels of communication, network has typically some X channels. The channels get clogged up, communication can't go through. Another same issue in terms of using a commercial network. Another need for having a private network only to be used by public safety agencies. We have seen that in recent times in India as well. A typical example I've put across over here is the Bombay blast. The ministers and the government officials and the functionaries could not reach out to the on-ground first responders of public safety agencies because they were trying to reach